this is one of 7 courses that we have, and we're still creating them. The first one is, meeting community members where they're at, Palestine 101, which is we realized that a lot of people in our central Pennsylvania area, they really think that this is a religious war, that it's complicated, and that what's going on in Gaza is not a genocide. So that one is really just building up the framework and just meeting community members where they're at. We go a level higher. We talk about the U.S. political involvement in Palestine the last 100 years, and then Nakba, the Nakba. And so the series goes on, the Nakba, the first and second Intifada, the various wars on Gaza, up into the latest and ongoing Gaza genocide, as well as the global Intifada that has since resulted. So today is May 15th. Today is internationally recognized as Nakba Day. So we really wanted to host this event today, marking the 76th annual Nakba. So just a show of hands, not to put anyone on the spot, but who here has heard the word Nakba before? Okay, so everyone, that's great. So we're going to talk about the Nakba, but first we want to talk about the events leading up to the Nakba. Then we want to talk about what the Nakba is and how it came to be, as well as the various villages that were ethnically cleansed, the Palestinians forcefully displaced. We're going to take a closer look at each of those. We're going to talk about the right of return and why it's impossible as a structure, and why it contradicts really what's going on, and how it can't actually solve any problems. And then we're going to talk more depth about how the Nakba never stopped and how it's continuing. And we're going to do that by, I'm going to introduce a panel of local Palestinians who will share their stories and share their experiences. And we have I'm really excited because we have a very diverse panel, and we have Palestinians that lived inside the Israeli territories, as opposed to Palestinians that have never visited their homeland. So I'm really excited to just amplify those voices and get everyone here to hear those stories that we so desperately need to hear. So the events leading up to the Nakba, people like to start at the creation of Israel, 1948, 1947. However, I like to start at the Balfour Declaration, because really it was back in November of 1917 where all of the Zionist movement started, and it started having a direct impact and effect in Palestine. So November 2nd, 1917, there was a Balfour Declaration in which the British promised the land of Palestine to the British people. And so if you're not aware, this is something we covered in Palestine 101, but very briefly, Palestine was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, and then it became under the control of the British mandate under false pretense of a mandate, which is, it was supposed to be under the Palestinian leadership, but that's how a mandate is supposed to work. However, that's not what happened. What happened really was that the British were working behind the scenes, communicating with Zionists in Europe and promising the land of Palestine to the Jewish Zionists who were in Europe, which we call Ashkenazi Jews. So Mizrahi Jews are Jews who were born, raised in Palestine, as opposed to Ashkenazi Jews who are European descent. And that's very important as we go forward to keep in mind, because I'm going to talk about the numbers of Mizrahi Jews as opposed to Ashkenazi Jews, and we'll talk about how that relates to the modern Israel and how that demographic is made up. And then it's really important to talk about the series of massacres that were happening by Zionist militia forces, by the Stern Gang, the Haganah, the Palmach, and how that resulted. That was all throughout the 1920s and 1930s. That's when Palestinian resistance fighting really sparked and really started with the Fada'iyin, and they started really defending their homeland and fighting in that time period. And that's when the kofia became a symbol of Palestinian resistance, because Palestinian fighters would, as opposed to Palestinians wearing the kofia to farm, to shield themselves from the sunlight and the heat, they would wrap it around their faces to hide their identity from the British and the Zionist forces that were taking them and imprisoning them for their activism. And so then in 1939, the white papers were signed by the British to limit immigration from Europe to Palestine, because while ever since 1917, there has been immigration from Europe, since there was a lot of pogroms, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, and Jews were being prosecuted on the daily. And this is, before even the Holocaust, there was pogroms and a lot of anti-Semitism that European Jews were escaping from. The Zionist movement was bringing them to Palestine. And then in 1939, the British signed the white papers to limit immigration. And then after 1939, the immigration didn't actually stop. It increased in 1945 as a result of the end of the World War II. Whenever the Holocaust ended, of course, understandably, Jews wanted to escape the horrors of the Holocaust. But where did they go? They came to Palestine. And that was when there was an influx of Jewish immigration. The percentage before 1945 was 3%. So 3% of the entire demographics of Palestine was of Jewish descent, and that was, again, Mizrahi Jews. After 1945 and the mass influx of immigration, that 3% rised drastically to 7%. So just to show you how much this mass immigration was, 3% to 7%, 5% in just that time span. And then in 1947, the United Nations partitioned the land of Palestine with Resolution 181, and they cut up Palestine into the map that we'll take a closer look at in a little bit, but it is what we refer to today as the 67 borders, partitioning more than half of the land as a Jewish state and keeping less than half of the land for the Palestinians who were already there. And then the last thing we have, and this is where most people start talking about Palestine, is the establishment of the State of Israel in May 14, 1947. Almost overnight, the Nakba started. So the Nakba, you can argue, started, way before, whenever Palestinians started being targeted and started being killed as a result of Zionist movement. However, most people refer to the Nakba starting from 1947 because almost overnight, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced and hundreds of villages were raided and ethnically cleansed. So the word Nakba, as many of you know, is simply the Arabic word for catastrophe. And so I've been in a lot of talks recently and a lot of dialogue with people who tell me that they're struggling with the term Nakba, and they're having a hard time recognizing the Nakba. And this, I just want to clarify that the word Nakba is an adjective. It is a Palestinian perspective and proclamation of the events that unfolded and determined their livelihood. So in that, it is not anyone's place to deny or confirm events that happened, because the Nakba is not even talking about necessarily the events, but the effect it had on Palestinians. And the only people who are able to speak to that are the ones who experienced it. And so the Palestinians themselves are the ones that coined this word and this adjective to their experiences, because they felt that what happened to them was catastrophic. And so we can use any other words, but we cannot deny this word because it is the word directly given to us from the Palestinians who directly experienced these events. The events of So were 500 plus villages were ethnically cleansed, and over 8,000 people were forcefully displaced and expelled. We'll take a closer look on where those people are now. And over 13,000 civilians were killed. And I just want to take a moment to bring this back to the current genocide that's unfolding in Gaza. So in the Nakba, 1947 and 1948, 13,000 people were killed. This number is less than the total number of children, not civilians, children, killed in Gaza since October of 2023. So I really want that to sink in, because throughout this presentation, I'm going to try to bring it back to Gaza, just because everything we do needs to bring something back to Gaza, since the people there are still suffering. So we're going to take a closer look at the Nakba and how it happened. So whenever the creation of Israel was established in 1947, actually even before, whenever the United Nations partitioned the land of Palestine and declared that this is the portion that will be a Jewish state, the Zionists in Europe started coming up with a plan on how to create a Jewish majority on that land. So they drafted Plan A, they drafted Plan B, they drafted Plan C, and then what stuck was Plan D, otherwise known as Plan Deluxe. And I'm just going to read from, this is directly from Israeli historian Ilan Pape in his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Like Plans A and B, Plan C aimed to prepare the military forces of the Jewish community in Palestine for offensive campaigns. Plan C spelled out clearly what punitive actions of this would entail: killing the Palestinian political leadership, insiders, and their financial supporters, damaging Palestinian transportation, damaging the sources of Palestinian livelihood, well waters, mills, etc., attacking nearby villages, attacking Palestinian clubs, coffee houses, meeting places, etc. Plan Deluxe, otherwise known as Plan D, is known today as the blueprint of Israel. And Israel is still currently expanding on this blueprint. And if you study Plan Deluxe, you will see that historically, every expansion of Israel has strictly followed Plan D. And so Palestinians know exactly what the plan is. They know exactly where Israel wants to take this. It's not something that is a secret. And these operations can be carried out in the following manner. This is according to Plan D, which was the final blueprint of Israel. Either by destroying villages, by setting fire to them, by blowing them up, by planting mines in their debris. In the case of resistance, the armed forces must be wiped out and the population expelled outside the borders of the state. And this is exactly what has been happening. So a closer look at the 500 villages that were ethnically cleansed. In the red, these are the villages that were destroyed December 1947 to May 1948. So again, you can see this is before even the creation of Israel started. And then in December of 1947, the blue was destroyed after Israel created its independence. So as you can see in the first graph, there was a number of villages that was already ethnically cleansed before Israel's statehood was established. And if you look at the way that the land of Palestine was partitioned in 1947 by the United Nations, it shows here in this graph, the last one, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, it was kept for Palestinians and the rest was Israel. Basically what the United Nations did is they followed Plan Deluxe, they followed Plan D, and they basically gave Israel the land that it had already been taking. And so if you look at the map and you say, wait, why didn't they just give the top half to Israel and the bottom half to the Palestinians, or vice versa? This is why. Because they were in close communication with the Zionists and they knew exactly what the plan was, and they were trying to stick with something that was already in the works. So I want to also, I mentioned how 3% of the demographics was Mizrahi Jewish in 1940, before the creation of Israel, before 1945, and after 1945, after the mass immigration from Europe, that number went to 7% of the total population, being, Ashkenazi Jews coming, and the Ashkenazi Jews and the Mizrahi Jews combined became 7%. So this is a graph that I wanted to, compare. You saw the maps before and how the demographics like how many villages were displaced. So before 1947 and 1945, this is what, before 1945, before the mass immigration, this is what the demographics look like. So all of the red was shared public property between the Jewish population, the Mizrahi Jewish population, and the Palestinian population. And I want to take a moment just to remind everyone that Mizrahi Jews were considered Palestinian. So when I say Palestinian, just for the sake of, it's more modernized, but what I mean is Arab Palestinians. But all of this was owned by Palestine. So the red was shared between Arabs and Jews. The green was Arab owned, and the small slivers here that are white was Jewish owned land. And so just to take a comparison study of before the mass immigration after World War II to after. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Kasitna. Just because this village, nothing drastic happened. It was this story is as tragic as it is. It's just like any other village. It's not like Deir Yassin, which we will talk about, or Lydia, which we will talk about. But I wanted to just uplift it because it still is, close to our hearts, and it really kind of shows the quiet genocide. Because what often makes the headlines is, the mass slaughter. However, whenever something is a quieter genocide, it is still a genocide, and it still merits a conversation. So Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants from Germany and Central and Eastern Europe established a kibbutz 3 kilometers north of Kasitna in 1939. And then Kasitna was occupied July 9th of 1948. And 1 year later, in 1949, the Zionist militia groups established settlements, the settlements that are today known as Rugat and Kefran. And they drove the residents of Kasitna south towards Gaza. So the reason why I also wanted to uplift this is because many of the people in Gaza now were, as you know, displaced once, twice, 3 times. So many of the people in Gaza started here in Kasitna, and this village today is completely empty. The only thing that remains is debris and memories that will never be brought. I guess memories that the people who had them will just never have complete. And so I also want to take a minute to really scale what happened with the Nakba. So over 8,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their lands. Today, that number, them plus their descendants, is over 7 million. And this is, again, a lot of us are in this room, not a lot of us, many of us in this room are from that 7 million, but just to really show how the numbers have expanded and grown, and we're still, suffering from the Nakba, and that's why the Nakba never ended. So of the 500 plus villages that were expelled, I just want to give a closer look to how the refugee route was. And so people who were in the Beersheba and the Bedouins down in the south, they went to, anyone know this country here? Jordan. Yep, they went to Jordan. The refugee, the Palestinians displaced from Jerusalem and Ramallah, they also went to Jordan. From Gaza, a lot of them went to Hebron. And then after, Hebron is also like a very heavily targeted village in Palestine. There's a lot that goes on in Hebron. It's even been bombed, even though it's in the West Bank. We have people in Ramla who also went down Egypt, right? So no, I just wanted to interact. And so this just shows like how the Palestinian population was displaced and moved around. And so around 80% of the Palestinian population was expelled in 1948 into neighboring countries. 80% of the Palestinian population. Today, more than 5.8 million of the Palestinian refugees live in countries outside of the countries that they were born into, which is Palestine, outside of the country that they were born to. So Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. So 7 million in the diaspora, 5.8 million of those in neighboring countries. Over 70 massacres happened in the Nakba in the span of 1947 to 1948. I want to specify that because, again, the Nakba never ended. And so every massacre since the creation of Israel and prior to that even has been part of the Nakba, but just focusing a closer look on the 2 years since the establishment of Israel, over 70 massacres have happened. I want to take a moment to read them all just so that it soaks in a little bit. Haifa massacre, October 1947, 6 people were killed. Balad al-Sheikh, December 1947, 70 people were killed. Sasa massacres, February 1948, 11 were killed, including 5 children. Deir Yassin massacre, April 1948, 107 plus people were killed, including 55 children orphaned. Saliha massacre, October 1948, 94 individuals were killed. And Lida, Lid massacre, July 1948, 200 plus killed. El Khiskhas massacre, December 1947, 12 people killed, 5 children killed. Bab al-Amud massacre in Al-Quds, otherwise known as Jerusalem, in 1947, 41 were killed. And Yafa massacre, December 1948, over 20 people were killed. And I highlighted Deir Yassin and Lida because, again, not because, those massacres were more brutal. They were, but all of them are equally as brutal because, to a Palestinian, it doesn't matter. All of it is a catastrophe. However, I wanted to highlight these two because the stories that we heard in the aftermath of Deir Yassin and Lida are the exact same stories that we heard circulate the news when October 7th happened. And I'm not even talking about Gaza. I'm talking about whenever Hamas attacked civilians in Israel, the stories that we heard and why I knew instantly that it was propaganda is because they were recycled stories from Deir Yassin and Lid. Beheaded babies. That is something that we heard in Deir Yassin, and that is something that scared people and made them flee. That was something that was used as propaganda, and it was also verified that there were images and there were documentations of beheaded babies, as well as a story of a baby cooked in the oven. So this is something that we grew up hearing. Women who were raped until their backs were broken, word for word. This is something that we grew up hearing about Lida massacre. So the reason why I highlighted these is because they're stories that we are hearing today. They're very triggering for us to hear because they remind us of the same exact stories from the Nakba. And again, we were reminded whenever October 7th happened, a lot of the Israeli government officials told us that the Nakba is going to be a sweet memory once we're done with Gaza. Again, the Nakba never ended. Tibya massacre, October 1953, 69 killed. Khan Yunis, Gaza massacre, November 1956, over 250 killed. Sabra and Shatila massacres happened in the refugee camps in Lebanon to Palestinians who were kicked out of their country. In 1982, over 3,500 individuals were killed. Al-Aqsa massacre, again in October 1990, again Al-Aqsa is Jerusalem. Ibrahim Mosque massacre, February 1994, 29 killed. Jenin refugee camps, we had a panelist today who was from Jenin. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, but I was really looking forward to it because she was from Jenin and she has so many stories, but hopefully we'll have her again, so please stay tuned. The Gaza massacres, December 2008 to January 2009, 1,383 killed, 333 children. Gaza massacres, October 2012, 273 killed. Gaza massacres, July to August 2014, 2,310 killed, 551 children. Gaza massacres, March 2018 to December 2019, during the peaceful Great March of Return protests. And I want to take a moment to remember Izzuddin and Sarwa, who was a resident and a member of our community here in Harrisburg who lived here for over a year. He was shot in 2018 in the Great March of Return peaceful protest. His leg was amputated. He came to Harrisburg with the help of PCRF, Palestine Children Relief Funds. He got a leg, and then he went back only to be killed in the recent genocide of Gaza on December 23rd of 2023. The Gaza massacres, May 2021, 240 killed, 59 of them children. The Gaza massacres, August 2022, 49 killed, 17 children. And the ongoing Gaza massacre after massacre, October 2023, and it's still ongoing, where over 45,000 civilians were verified dead, verified killed, over 16,000 children verified killed. And again, I'm using the word verified. I want to stress that because once this genocide is over, we're going to find possibly hundreds of thousands of more bodies under the rubble. So the Nakba is ongoing. It never ended. One way in which it never ends is the continuous and ongoing massacres. Another way that it never ends is by Israel upholding its military occupation and apartheid throughout Palestine. And so this is how the United Nations partitioned Palestine in 1947. So Palestine initially, historic Palestine had 16 districts. One of those districts was Gaza. This is how the district of Gaza looked like. So that was how the district of Gaza looked like. And now it's just the Gaza Strip. So all of the land of Palestine is under military occupation. The Palestinian Israelis who are not allowed to call themselves Palestinians openly, so they have to call themselves Arab Israelis that live inside the Israeli territories, Israel here in the red. They live under apartheid because they cannot necessarily live the same way that Jewish Israelis or non-Palestinian Israelis can live. There's different laws for them. There's different contracts that they have to fill for them to buy houses or to own land. They're tried differently in court. And so that's just, Leila could speak more about that because she also grew up as a Palestinian Israeli living in the Israeli territories, and she'll speak to that. So I'll say that for her. The Palestinians in the West Bank, I'm from the West Bank, my family is still in the West Bank. And the occupation there is twofold. We're under a military occupation from the Israelis, but we're also under an occupation from the Palestinian Authority, which is under an occupation of the Israelis. So our Palestinian Liberation Organization, Mahmoud Abbas, our president, he is, they're not able to do anything that Israel does not allow them to do. And that is why there's so many factions within Palestine, because there's resistance to occupation in all of its forms, including suppressing Palestinians and policing them with their own people. And then we have the Gaza Strip. Everyone knows what's currently happening there. Gaza is bombed every few years, but aside from that, when there's no bombing, there is a blockade and a siege. The Mediterranean Sea, all of Gaza is on the border of the sea. However, we cannot access our seawater. We're only allowed 16 nautical miles where there's essentially no fish. And fishing is one of the main economic resources for Palestinians in Gaza, because again, there's a blockade on them. They cannot get food from outside countries. They cannot get food from the greater Palestine. The only resources they have are very limited. Israel counts their calories coming in from Israel or any other countries. Their calories are counted, and that's something that we discussed in Palestine 101. And so whenever we talk about a two-state solution and we talk about the right of return, those two things are never talked about together. But I feel like that's the only way that we can talk about the two-state solution. So the two-state solution is recognized by our government, by the US, as the diplomatic solution to Palestine. And so I wanted to take a moment to really talk about how the two-state solution can never really be a solution to the problem of the occupation and the apartheid and the colonialism of the colonization of Palestine. Because as you saw in the maps before, the Israeli territories territories is exactly where the villages that were displaced is now in place of. So the 500 plus villages that were ethnically cleansed are now currently under Israeli territory. So there is no way for Palestinians living in Jordan, living in Syria, living in Lebanon, who, by the way, that 5.8 million, most of those are living in refugee camps. So those Palestinians currently living in refugee camps cannot come back to Palestine if there is a two-state solution, because all of them will have to be crammed into the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Because when the US talks about a two-state solution, that's what they're talking about, the pre-67 borders, not the places where they actually had their homes and their land. So the two contradict each other. You cannot have a two-state solution and have Palestinians come back to their land. And so to accept a two-state solution would mean Palestinians are not allowed back to their land. And unless, of course, there are conditions of, the two-state solution being the first step in the process of a free and liberated Palestine, which is a Palestine from the river to the sea, from the Jordanian River to the Mediterranean Sea and everything in between. So I wanted to really amplify the voices of local Palestinians. However, our local Palestinians that are a little older didn't feel very comfortable sharing, or they didn't have much, that they felt they could contribute. So I wanted to share some stories from the older generation who have direct links from Palestine. So I'm just going to share one or two videos from here. And before I do, I want to highlight Palestine Remembered. Palestine Remembered can be accessed online. There is over 1,300 oral interviews from Nakba survivors. However, it is all in Arabic. They don't have translations. But if you do want to find Nakba stories that are translated into English, there's plenty on YouTube. I just grabbed a few here that were 2 to 3 minutes long.
صرنا تحت الشجر، كنا ملوك صرنا لاجئين. أولاد القاتل كل خوف من الخوف، وأنا عيط وأبوي يعيط وأختي تعيط وست تعيط وكلنا نعيط. والله في الهم اللي شفته راحت. طفولتي المبكرة هناك، يعني حضن الأم والأب والبيت وأختي وأخوي وولادي الجيران. كنا ننزل على العين، على البركة، على الماء، الواحد بيكون زي السمك. كنا سنية كسروها وعين دينها أنا كمان عملوها الثانية، وقعدنا يا أحمد يا أحمد، لا لقينا هان ولا لقينا وحالتنا من وين. كان على اللي كنت أسمعه من الحج إيش كانوا في البلاد، كان عندهم بير وكان عندهم دور وكان عندهم خدم وحشم، وضعهم خير الوضع تمام. تمام، انتم ممشيين وعايشين. وطبعا ناس بس اتهجروا من بلادهم وتبهدلوا، وبعد ما تهجروا من بلادهم هاي احنا كمان عندنا نكبة.
من عرب السبع كذا بطيحة السبع عمره 110 سنين، لأن أنا حاضر تركيا، حاضر حرب تركيا مع بريطانيا وأنا سني 12 سنة. هاجرنا اليهود، هاجرنا من 48، كنا في بلدنا في بطيحة، بطيحة قضى السبع، يعني هذه قرية بدوية. أجوا اليهود منا وقبله، ضربوا لهم صاروخ، كنا عزل، هاجرنا جينا هنا على وين؟ على غزة. كل عرب السبع كل من قال أنا بدوي هذا سكن فيه. استلمت اليهود البلاد كلها، استلمتها كلها في 24 ساعة، لأنه فيش حرب، فيش ناس تقاوم، فيش ناس تقاوم. أجوا المصريين، الجيش المصري قعد في الفلوجة، جمال عبد الناصر ومحمد نجيب. اليهود خذت كل قطاع غزة إلا الفلوجة ما خشت، ما قدرتش تخش. دولتين مع بعض أجانب حاربوا بعضهم، انكسرت تركيا، سحبت تركيا، سلمت بريطانيا العهد. ظلينا في عهد بريطانيا إلى 48 لما قامت اليهود على العرب. نحن البلاد والله أموت فيها، وبطلب من الله إني ما أموت إلا يعني أحارب على الكلام والله مش كثير على الأرض. يمكن الليلة أطلع على السلك وعلى يقول الطب فلا أوضى من هناك. وتعالى يا جود وتفرج بثاني على الوجود يا أبوي ما كانت يا
So these are some resources that I would really encourage everyone to look into. The first two are from ST, Empowering Self-Students and Society Through Education, who HPC, Harrisburg Palestine Coalition, directly works with. We helped cultivate the material in the Padlet, the resources, as well as the curriculum itself. And this is what we are trying to get into the local school districts, as well as to in hands of teachers. So please check that out. We also have business cards with our emails. You can email us, we can send you these links. We also have QR codes here that you can take and scan and visit all of these. I would also recommend Palestine Remembered, Visualizing Palestine, the Palestine Academy, which my cousin Subhi Taha put together. So I feel like I have to put that in there. And the interactive encyclopedia of the Palestine question, which is really interesting. It shows you also the villages. You zoom in there, it tells you how many people were displaced, how many, what the demographics looked before and how they look now. And I would really recommend Ilan Pape's Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, as well as All That Remains. And we have some of those books here. You can look at after. I also want to take a moment to invite everyone to a call to action. So at Harrisburg Palestine Coalition, we like to close all of our events with a call to action so that people are learning, using what they learned into action to mobilize themselves and their community. So on Saturday, the 18th, we are going to carpool. We're going to go to DC. So anyone who is interested, doesn't have a ride, get in contact with us. We can, mobilize a carpool and we can go to the National March for Gaza and in honor of the Nakba. And then in York on Sunday, there is another rally for Palestine. So please feel free to join us in those. The second part of our event is a panel, and I would like to introduce the panelists. So Nadia, I was really excited for her to be here because, again, she grew up in Jenin. She has been bombed many times. She's survived somehow. So she was bombed. She was there in 2002 when Jenin was bombed. She has family members who were killed because of the bombing, because of the various raids. And she was going to talk about how often the raids happen. And she also was going to share some beauty and joy that happens in Jenin. So I was really excited about that. But again, we'll have her another time. Sharif Abdulrahman Abu Ayyub is a second generation Palestinian American born in New Jersey and raised in Pittston, PA. His father fled the 1967 war on Palestine. He is married to Maryam Abdul Hamid and the father of 4 lovely children. Sharif, could you please come up and let's give a round of applause. Layla Kidan, Palestinian born in Pennsylvania breed. Layla Kidan has been committed to the art of storytelling and acting ever since she was young. Her aim in life is to create stories that share the individual and collective experiences of the Palestinian people. Layla is also mobilizing the community to take part in the Gaza monologue sometime in the fall, where we're going to, she's gonna help, showcase and uplift the stories from Gaza directly in a play. So please, everyone, welcome Layla. Layla Yaghnam is Palestinian American born in the US and lived approximately 8 years in the West Bank during her teenage years. She earned her MA in speech, language, and hearing pathology at Temple University and currently services the children at Harrisburg School District. She is passionate about education and raising awareness about Palestine. In addition to her work as an SLP, Layla teaches Arabic and Quran studies at Islamic Center of Pennsylvania. She plans to participate in cultural events representing and uplifting Palestine. She is a mother of 3 lovely children. Layla, please welcome Layla. Sundus El-Hayek is a queer Palestinian born in the US. Her grandparents immigrated from Palestine to Jordan at an early age. While her parents immigrated from Jordan to the United States as young adults, both generations seeking stability and safety. Through community building across the country, Sundus centers underrepresented populations through education, art, workers' rights, mental health, and mutual aid, guided by generations of collectivist cultures rooted in hospitality. Please welcome Tony. Thank you for joining us and generously sharing your experiences. So each of you have about 10 minutes to share with your audience what you want to share about your experiences as a Palestinian, because we talked at length about how the Nakba never ended. And so there's really nothing that you can't say that isn't a valid experience and something that isn't worthy of being heard. So if you want to talk about stories that you heard from your parents and grandparents, lived experiences in Palestine, your experiences in the diaspora, please just share whatever it is that you feel comfortable sharing. I will ask that you pass the mic around. We're going to start with Sundus and
We are.
you want to start with Sharif? He's ready.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Liz.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm nervous, so it'll be helpful to go first and, So as she said, the Nakba really is not over, right? Historians date it to 1948, but it's not truly 1948 as she explained. It even started well before 1917, before the Balfour Declaration. Zionists have been lobbying with the British government way before 1917, trying to get Palestine as their country. And they plotted and they planned, and everything was already in place way before 1948. And now they are just carrying out their plans. And it's been from that time up until now. And as we can see in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza, and I want to bring highlight to other things that perhaps the media doesn't cover as much. They cover the mass genocides, right? But then they overlook the little individual things here and there. Although they're great in number, they don't really cover them. So I want to talk about how the stealing of land is happening, the displacement of the Palestinians. So as you've seen in the map, right, the Israeli government took over land that they do, Israeli government territory, and those little dots trickled here and there, they call it Palestinian territory, right? That's Palestinian. And so even within the Palestinian land, those little scattered dots here and there, it is not truly Palestinian land. It is occupied by Israeli military and government. Within that land that they dotted here and there are illegal settlements in there. So in the West Bank itself, there's over 500,000 of illegal settlements. In East Jerusalem, there's over 200,000 illegal settlements. So in my village, Jabba, within walking distance, I would say 30 minutes, you would see a settlement right there. They're literally in our backyards, right? And the settlements often take on hills, right, in higher level grounds. So when you look, you'll see a settlement here, you'll see one there, they're scattered amongst us. So in any moment when wars happen, or even just for fun, you'll see a settler as young as 11, as young as 12, show up on your land where you grow olive gardens, and they have weapons because they're allowed to have it, and they come and they scare the elderly, they scare the children, they forbid you from entering your own land, they will burn your olive trees down, right? All your hard work, and they will wait until your olive trees have grown, until you want to go and reap your hard work. And I don't know if you guys understand, but olive trees and land is a big thing to Palestinians, right? When I first moved, after I finished 5th grade, I moved to Palestine. And like, as part of it, you're gonna learn how to plant, you're gonna learn how to take care of the trees, you're going to learn agriculture, you're going to learn all this. This is just a Palestinian thing. And so, as I said, they're in our backyards, they just show up in our lands, and then we're not allowed to enter them. So I remember, as I said, when we went there, we were planting olive trees, walking distance from our home, 15 minutes. And it's a big land. And we're planting and we're taking time, it's very hot, right? There's not a lot of water. You're literally carrying water to these trees. We've been doing it for years. And now that years have passed, the trees are grown. We can't go every year to go there. We're unable to go and pick the olives, right? All our hard work, we're not able to go there. And if we do in this 1 year here, maybe 3 years now, it is literally as we're sneaking, as if we're thieves trying to get to our land. Like, you have people that are monitoring, listening to see if there are settlers coming here and there. So you have to be at a lookout to go to your own land. Your land that is from your great-grandfathers, from your ancestors. So this is one way that they steal land, right? Indirectly, they take it. They say, "This, you worked on it, you planted it, we're gonna come, we're gonna burn it down, and you're not allowed to enter that." I just wrote notes just to keep myself up with this. And then, right, these settlers are very close to us, but we don't have the same rights as them, right? They have the right to bear arms, they have the rights to walk freely in the land, they have the right to citizenship. The moment they enter the airport, even if they've never been to that country before, like, even if they have no ties whatsoever, they're allowed to enter that country. Whereas Palestinians, my parents, Palestinian born, from a line of Palestinians, they traveled to the US in 1984. While they were here, within 2 years, their citizenship was revoked from them. No explanation. It was taken away. They're no longer citizens over there. So when we go as guests, right? My parents and I, we go as guests on a visa for 3 months if we are approved for one. I want to share a story. My siblings, they had left, we were in Palestine. They had left on a short vacation. And then when they came back, you have to enter through the Jordan border, right? You go through the Jordan government, and then you go through the Israeli government. One was 10, one was 11 at that age. They refused to allow them re-entry into Palestine, into their parents' land, their great-grandfather's land, they were not allowed re-entry into there. They told them go back, and they had to go back into Jordan and figure out a way to get to America on their own. 10 and 11 years. This was around the year 2000. And we said, and as I said, we don't have the same rights as them. We're second-class citizens. They get the land, they get the homes, they come, you have a home, you have a land, you have everything. We go there in our own land, these dotted places that they said, Palestinian territory, your land that you inherited from your great-great-grandfather. You want to build on that land, you're not allowed without a permit from the Israeli government. Right? You got to go through paperwork and all that money. And a lot of times they'll say this land is not allowed to be built on. You can't build on these lands over here, right? And then people have no option. What are you gonna do? The family's growing, you need land. They go and they build. They know they're building, right? The Israeli government knows they're building. They wait until they build it, and then they bring a bulldozer, and then they knock it down. And then they charge them the cost of the demolishment. And they say, you have to pay for this. And this has happened so many times in my village, right? Even if they know you're building a room somewhere, and they know that they'll wait for you to build it, right? They say, oh, this person never permit. They'll wait for you to build it, and they'll come and they'll knock it down. So just talking more about how they forcefully take our land, right? We're even on the smallest scale. So we see it on the large scale in Gaza. This is even on smallest scale, and they do this here, and there until they are trying to take over the entire land. So even in East Jerusalem, this happens a lot where they go and they weld the doors shut and they weld the windows shut, right? This door is facing a road that they do not want to share with the Palestinian Arabs. You're not allowed to come out this door. You're not allowed to walk on this road. We're welding it shut. We're welding this window shut. And so now the Palestinians are forced to come out another way, put a hole in the wall, climb over the roof, right? This is to try to pressurize them, to put them at discomfort, so that one way will drive them out this way, right? They're not going out, we're gonna drive them out. Another thing that happens a lot in East Jerusalem, and I've seen it a lot, is what we call here squatters, right? They go in, they share the house with you. This is your house, we're moving in, we bring in all our stuff, right? The settlers, the Jews, they come, they bring their family, and they're like, this is our room, this is our room, this is our kitchen, you can have this. They literally come and take over your house. And a lot of people have stood and they stay their grounds, but you imagine someone coming to with your kids, right? And trying to, in your home, making you very uncomfortable, right? Trying to attack you from within. So this is one of their ways to drive people out, to take over their homes, to take over their land. They're not doing mass genocide, they're doing it on a quiet level. We'll do this to this house, this to this house, this to this house. Now we have the whole block. We have this whole alley. This is ours now. Another thing that they do to take over land and this place is checkpoints, right? Blockades. We're gonna block people, they can't go into the city. We're gonna put a wall. Gaza has been surrounded by walls since the 1990s, right? Barricades, checkpoints. Kalandia is a camp, a refugee camp. Palestinians from their towns, during all these wars, they created the refugee camp, Kalandia. Overcrowded, right? Scarce resources. Out there is a checkpoint. Checkpoint as if you were going to enter a prison. You go through screenings, you show your ID, interrogation, why are you passing? All to go where? To a city that used to be 20 minutes from you driving to go buy groceries. You have to explain yourself why you're going. And it's a line that goes all the way around. So you're standing in the heat, you're waiting for their mercy to allow you to go to the hospital, to allow you to enter to go visit a grandma of yours, to allow you to buy groceries for your family. So this is what the Palestinians have to endure. We don't want you to enter this place, we block it off. You're not allowed to enter no more. This is our land. You want to go only through if we allow you. And this is you going from that little dot of what they call Palestinian territory to another dot of what they call Palestinian territory, right? So whatever they even claim to be Palestinian, they still don't let you go there. Now imagine going to a place, but that they took, right? That the Israeli government took and called theirs. You need a visa to enter there, a visa, as if you're going to another country. So to pray in the Aqsa Mosque, you can't just have a Palestinian ID. You have to have a visa that you applied for from the Israeli government. And those visas mostly only go to the elderly. Young, you can't even imagine to get one. It's very hard. My aunt, 65 years old, born and lived in Palestine all her life, ancestors all her life in Palestine. To go to pray, she needs a visa. And then a visa expires and you have to reapply. Another thing about, as I said, right? They do on the there's not a lot of coverage on this, but this is what is happening on low scales and accumulates on top of each other and it becomes massive. Is when they plotted their plan to take over Palestine, what part of Palestine did they take? You look at the map, what they started off was all the areas that are near the water, right? Tabariya, Akka, these are all near bodies of water. They have full control of the water and trade. My village, on a good day, on good times, right? On good times, when they want to be generous, will have access to water supply once a week. Imagine a village, and this is every village. Some people don't even get water. Some villages don't even get water. That is, they have wells, they started building wells, or they go and purchase water, right? For their cleaning, their showering, your baby bottles, everything is purchased water. And those villages that are lucky that get it once a week on good times, it's coming to all the village. And then you're hoping that you fill that tank that's on top of your roof, and you never really get it filled, right? And it's coming and everyone's using it and it is low pressure. And this is once a week. And this is water that you're going to use for the entire week. You have no access to water. They control it. They don't want it, they'll shut it off. No problem. They don't want to give you water, they shut it off. No excuses. Whereas, as I said, the settlers, they don't have the same, right? The settlers that are within 30 minutes walking, you really see them right there on the hilltop, will have access to unlimited water. They have in-ground pools. You can't have drinking water, but they'll have in-ground pools. Right? And this is how they control our access. This is how they take our land. They take the resources. And this is things that are not covered a lot in media. You don't hear that, but this is a day-to-day living. This is how we live. You want to go grocery shopping? You got to pass through the checkpoint. You want water? You got to wait and keep checking to see when there is water coming through those pipes and then direct it to fill your tank. You want water, right? To stay for a week, you're going to have to really limit the amount you are using for dishes, limit the amount you are showering, how much your family is showering. You have to become very resourceful. And, as Palestinians, we are really good at being resourceful, but there is such a limit to how much you can do. So these are just things that I wanted to share with you about this ongoing Nakba. We see it on great scales all the time on the media, but we don't see these ongoing, which are great scales, but perhaps lesser than lesser than the mass genocide, but it is still happening. And they force people out. They force people out. Whether they do it forcefully or the people say, well, we can't live like this. I can't work. Right? With all these checkpoints, people can't work. People are starving. It's hard for them to find a job. Where are you going to go? You don't have access to water. So they force people out this way. They force them out by genocide. They force them out by causing all this pressure on them. They are forcing them out. And as Hadi said, there are over 7 million estimated refugees right now. And that's all I just have to share. I'm glad that you guys listened to me and sharing these experiences that I had. These are experiences the Palestinians go. It has become part of their life.
Okay. I have a really hard time, I think, thinking about my connection because mine is so fractured. My grandparents left at some point when they were young, And as far as I know, it may have been before 48, it might have been after. I'm not 100% sure because of the fact that my parents also immigrated. And I've lived most of my life in this country. I visited two of my grandparents in 2008, and that was the last time I saw any grandparents. My dad's dad died before I was born. My mom's dad died when I was in 3rd grade. My mom's mom is not very sane. And then my dad's mom is the only one left that would tell stories. But she grew up really countryside villager, like chasing her own chickens and everything. And she was a really, really lovely, kind woman, but I just didn't really have the chance to grow up with her like a lot of other people do. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but it's very, very difficult for me because what little I know about the village that I come from is that it's incredibly impoverished, that there's no access to water. Like Leila was saying, they don't have access to their own waters. They used to have their own wells, and Israel shut those off. They don't have access to water except for going out to buy it. They don't have access to proper education. People can't just have a good education at home. They have to have access to visas to go to Israel. They have to have access to go out of the country, which most people don't. And when I was looking at the rates of graduation or education of any type, it was just so abysmal. And it honestly is, to me, when I was in college, one of the things that I spent a lot of time learning about was the indigenous population in Seattle, because that's where I went to college, in Seattle, Washington. And the graduation and education rates for the indigenous populations in Seattle was so low. The rates of, I mean, in this country, at least, alcoholism and depression and early death are so high in those populations. And when I was starting to do some research and trying to find out about my own family, my own ancestry, where I come from, it's the same story. I mean, it's colonization. It's what it does to people. It breaks them down in such a way. When you completely limit movement, there's blockades. You can't just go and leave. You can't go to the grocery store on your own. You can't, I mean, you don't know if you're going to go to a checkpoint and the soldier is going to decide to be an asshole that day and shoot you. I mean, I remember my mom's friend was talking about her nephew who was taking his younger brother to school, and he got shot with a rubber bullet and he lost his left eye. Like, that's not abnormal though. That's completely normal. So it's really, really hard for me to talk about my relationship with the Nakba because it fractured everything. There's not history in my village the way that there should be. I can't trace my roots the way that I should be able to. And because of the way that my grandparents immigrated and then my parents immigrated, and it's like colonization and capitalism has had such a severe impact on so many people, especially Black and brown people, people of color. We don't have the same access to resources. We don't have the preservation of our history in the same way. And I constantly, every time I read more about what's going on in Gaza, I think about how many family registries are completely inaccessible. How many of those little kids that are going to make it out, however many make it out, completely unable to trace any roots of who they are. Like, I'm very lucky and I grew up here with a lot of privilege, and I have parents that, stayed with me and taught me the few things that they knew about our culture. And I had Palestinian friends within the community who had immigrated here for the same reasons my parents immigrated here, for a safe, stable life. And I got to learn from them as well. But it's really hard for me to talk about how it's impacted me because I can't, go through a straight line and be like, this is how this has impacted this part of my family or that part of my family. Or like the last time we tried to go visit, we couldn't. I mean, it was, if you remember her talking about between 2008, 2009, the massacres in Gaza. So anytime things happen in Gaza, things are happening all across historical Palestine when it comes to repression, when it comes to suppression of voices, when it comes to kidnapping kids, beating people, making sure they're not standing up and resisting against those massacres. So at that time, my family wanted to cross over from Jordan. And everyone, and I mean everyone, whether it was family, friends, or family, they were like, do not go. It's dangerous. Your sons will not come back from this. And the fact that that's just a reality that you have to accept because we were born Palestinian is insane. And it shouldn't be true for anyone. It shouldn't be true for anyone ever. But I also want to bring back that we are all responsible for understanding this because we've paid into it billions of dollars every year for decades. Our money goes directly over there to commit these horrors, to make sure that this terrorist government is capable of withholding basic needs from people, is capable of suppressing resistance and freedom and human dignity. So you guys coming out here is really important because you are making the important step in educating yourself and keeping yourself closer to the truth. And our responsibility as American citizens who are directly contributing. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Like this.
I mean, you can hold it closer. It's okay.
Is that
I'm not sure if the Zoom can hear you if it's on the table. That's why I was holding it.
So as Hadil mentioned, we have Layla, who is from the West Bank, Sundus, who has never been back home to Palestine. And I am what they refer to as 48 Arabs. And this term is, if we say that to Palestinians, we know that term internally, but a lot of people do not know what that means. So I was born in Nazareth, which is inside the Israeli occupation, and me and my entire family, we all have Israeli citizenship. And growing up, I moved to the States when I was 1. Growing up in school, if people said, oh, you were born in Nazareth, so you're Jewish. I said, no. And they're like, okay, so what? Like, you're not Jewish? And I said, yeah, I'm Arab, my family's Muslim. And there are Arab and Muslims that live inside of Israel, and a lot of people do not know that. So when we talk about these mass villages being destroyed and the Nakba happening on such a massive genocidal scale, there are these, as we've mentioned, as Dia mentioned in the training, these little genocides that happen. So my town is called Baqa el-Gharbiya, and it means Baqa the West. And then we have a sister town called Baqa el-Sharqiya, which means Baqa the East, but it's ironically in the West Bank. And they were separated in 1948 when Israel was founded. And my family, when we talk about physical genocides, I think the genocide that has happened for my family is a genocide of identity and education, because in our school systems, and I'll get to that, in Israel, my cousins, they don't learn what it means to be Palestinian. They don't, as Adil mentioned, we call ourselves Arab Israelis. I'm half Palestinian, half white. My white mom taught me what it meant to be Palestinian. My dad is the only one of his brothers to have left Palestine, studied abroad. He went to Germany, and it was only there that he knew what it meant to be Palestinian, because he grew up in Israel with an Israeli citizenship, separated from the Palestinians in the West Bank, separated from Palestinians in Gaza. And that's what Israel does. They separate you from your people, and you just don't know who you are. So he learned what it meant to be Palestinian too when he left, which is an experience I don't think my other family has back home. And it's only this recently, since 2021 really, that they've been talking about their Palestinian identity. So back to the Nakba and the split of the town. So my town, Baqa el-Gharbiya, what I know from the land that was taken is, so there used to be both Baqa el-Gharbiya, Baqa el-Sharqiya together. About 5 miles away from us is a kibbutz called Gan Shmuel. And that kibbutz, like, we go to the McDonald's there, and there's a Toys R Us and a strip mall. And that land where this strip mall used to be part of my city, my grandmother, her farm. She grew up and she was a farmer, came from a farming family. And so now that's a strip mall with, business corporations and, it's a kibbutz. And that's, so, like, those are the little things that have happened, big little things that have happened in my village that the land that was taken from us. But I feel very lucky in a lot of ways in 1948 Palestine to have been to Palestine, because I meet so many people, Palestinians now, that have never been to the country. I feel like my family is very lucky. And in a lot of ways, we are ethnically, religiously, culturally Palestinian. But when you grow up in the Israeli school system, in the 4th grade, I was talking to my cousin recently, in the 4th grade, you are taught that Palestine was a desolate, diseased, barren land. And the Jews came, the Ashkenazi Jews came, and they saved it. And my cousin said one of the activities they did in elementary school that young is they make identity cards. Like they made Israeli identity cards. And I said, so I asked her, I said, well, did you go home? Did you question it? And she said, no, I just took it as fact at school. Like, why would I have to question it? Even though you can tell there's a difference between you and a Jewish Israeli, even though you are, as Layla said, treated as a second-class citizen, even though if you go out to a Jewish town and they see you, they'll make racist remarks, make fun of you, and that self-deprecating humor carries over into you as a Palestinian, as an Arab, and in your personality. And my other cousin, she, I talk about her when I do a lot of this work, because she wrote an article when she was in high school or early college. And she said, I didn't know I was Palestinian until I was 15 years old. 15 years old. So, and she, because of the school system, because of the education, and something she started doing to understand she was Palestinian is she started participating in Model UN conferences and traveling to Qatar and Turkey and different countries. And it was only when she talked to people outside, Palestinians outside of Israel, she knew who she was and found her identity, because it's not something that we talk about on the daily. You know, Hadil says, oh, like she grew up, you hear about these massacres. In my family, they don't talk about it. And I think that's something that has to do with the colonization, the fear. If you do talk about it, Walid Dakka, the prisoner who was recently, who died in prison, he was from my town, Baka. And, you know, if you talk about it, you're arrested. You're thrown in prison and you die. So you have the privilege to have an Israeli citizenship, but what does that privilege come with? It comes with such a huge cost of a loss of identity, of community, of knowing who you are, of your family, because there's still family on the other side of the wall in Baka el-Sharqiya in the West Bank. So I think it's important to recognize that, you know, there are Arabs, Palestinian in Israel still. Who still exist in Jaffa, in, you know, Tel Aviv, Jaffa. They are also treated as second-class citizens. They have, you know, you want something fixed. The Israeli government will not come fix your water, fix your windows, they want the houses to break down. They want everything to be destroyed, so then they'll just leave. And my cousin had friends in college who lived in Jaffa, and that was their experience. She also had a friend who lived in the north, Christian Palestinian friend, and homes were destroyed, neighborhoods were destroyed, but her family still got to stay like relatively close. And she told me that in that town, there is a museum that the Zionists built that tells a false history of that town and what it actually means. And it's not true, it's fabricated. So when you live, it's like when we go to school in the US, we get up, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we trust our teachers, we trust our textbooks, and you learn it's propaganda. So the settlers, the young settlers, as Layla was saying, learn violence from a young age, learn to destroy the olive trees, learn to destroy that. And the Palestinians that have Israeli citizenship learn to erase their own identity and who they are and assimilate into a culture that is not their own, where they're still not treated as equals.
Sharif Rahman, I go by Abdul Rahman a lot of the time as well. It's a similar case, Layla here. I was born in New Jersey, but I grew up here in Pennsylvania. my father and my mother came. Actually, my father came first in the '67 war. I seen pictures of him in military outfits, but he's like, no, I just left as fast as I could. He didn't want anything to do with it. He already noticed it was just a mess. He said the country's a mess, and I just wanted some place to raise a family. The place I come from is it's outside of Ramallah. It's closer to the border of Jordan. It's called the Nakba. It's a village, an olive tree village. My family lives in olive trees. Majority of everybody's there. We had thousands of acres of olive tree land. And my great grandfather was actually pretty much like known as the governor of the land. He had so much of it that he gave it to many Palestinian families, portions of it. So you have like places that's called Ramun, you have Deb Dewan, you have these places all outside, close, in the same, on one road called Dana Blue Road. That's about 10 to 15 minutes outside. I'd say about 10 minutes outside of Ramallah. Now we have all this land, but and this is outside. This is the West Bank. Sorry, it's the West Bank side. And you know, I hear a lot of things about, oh, it's not an apartheid, it's not an apartheid, it's not an apartheid. I'm like, okay, sure. So the first time I actually visited, but you know, let me trace back a bit. So I grew up in Pennsylvania here. I'm one of 5 boys. I grew up in an Italian town, so it was kind of pretty easy for me. You see how I grew up in an Italian town. But I just wanted to stress on the point that we assimilated. My father and my mother tried to assimilate as much as possible, coming as foreigners, and they didn't with more fear. So, like, don't make it known that you're like this. Don't make it known that you're like that, right? So when people would ask me where you're from, because first I was like, we'd be amongst a bunch of boys, right? And they'd be like, oh, we're all Italians here. I'm not Italian. And they're like, well, where are you from? I said, Palestine. I said, what? Palestinian? They had no idea, right? Right? Or Pakistan, you know, they would say these things like that, and they have no idea until I would say, no, Jews. Say, oh, okay, Jews. So you're Israeli. I'm like, no, I'm Palestinian. So I learned very early that my friends, my closest people I'm growing up with, they're all uninformed. And if they're not uninformed, when they get informed, then they're misinformed. So I realized that as growing as a teenager, growing up, and I would just subtly say things to them, like, you know, there's a Palestine, there's the people there, we've always been there. And I took it to myself to learn, because I came in as totally non-biased. I'm a middle of the road kind of guy, because I was born in America. I was raised in America. My father had Christmas trees when we were little. You know, I am Muslim, but that's how far, right, we would go to assimilate. Okay, we'd go to school. My oldest would ask for a Christmas tree, my older brother, and he's like, "Oh, all my friends have one. Okay, you know, here you go, it's a Christmas tree. You know, have fun with it." I was at the point with, you know, I actually thought my brother of mine was Jewish, so that's how much close I thought. I had no idea what I was growing up. Because there's a thing with Palestinian families, because we're mixed. We have a lot of different blood. If you have more, like a lot of children, there's going to be one that's really dark. Okay, it's a thing. I don't know what it is. It's something with genetics. But if you have like more than 3 or 4, there's one that is dark. And I thought my darkest brother was Jewish. I don't know. They had no connection of what. You know, there's so much learning I had to do. That's the point I'm trying to say. And so I never gave an opinion. I would just tell people where I was at. No, that exists, and that's where we're from. So as I got older, I did my own. You know, I did my own studying, and I would do it in a very careful way, not to get a bias, not to learn a bias or anything. You know, and as I'm growing up, you know, you're hearing people like saying, you know, derogatory names towards me and things like that. Once they find out that I am there, now as we get older, kids learn more. bomber, suicide bombings, and things like that. And I took it as learned how to have tough skin. And I just took it as that, and it's kind of dealt with like the camaraderie of the town. I just, Polish would bust Irish, Irish would bust the Polish, both of them would bust the Italians, So it was like a thing that we just having all in good fun, but it's still not something that you continue to do. You don't do it with malice, and nowadays I see that kind of same rhetoric, but with malice intent. So I grew up and started learning a lot about my culture. And as I started learning, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what's this? And I follow things through, large events. And I came to a crossroads where the crux of all these problems is when it's something called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And in this agreement, the world was moving from empires, large masses of, this is Ottoman Empire, this is Roman Empire, to nationalism, to everybody having a piece of the pie. And at a point in history, you notice that the whole Middle East and the Northern Africa were just cut up like a piece of cake, without any knowledge of demographics, language, any of it. And it was done by, I had no bias. I'm not saying this in any derogatory way, but it was done by white nationalist supremacist people that felt that they had the right to do something. Now, the effects of that, we're still dealing with. And this is something I just learned. You just know it from studying history, from studying what's going on in these places of the world. And from that, I realized, and this is the saddest point, in my opinion, because there was people, and from our religion that fought against themselves, okay? And it did happen in Arabia against the Ottomans. They did help the British to win, to gain control of that Palestine. So at the Sykes-Picot, they divided all these countries except they left Palestine as a mandate. They didn't decide, okay? And what I learned was that it was promised to the Palestinians, an Arab land. And it was promised in a letter before 1917, in 1950. And it was just really terrible, conniving thing to do to the people. You promised them a country and then, backstab them from then 1970 because you have similarities with the Zionist organization. And this is with Britain and the Zionist organization. And I learned this as I went through my knowledge, went through my studies and everything like that. And come to fast forward, I come, all these years of all this oppression. How do you solve it? Two-state solution, this, that, and I'm trying to get involved being an American here. How do I make an impact? And the best way I seen it was just teaching people, telling people close to me. A lot of my friends that were close to me, and it's funny. I just got a message last week from a girl in high school. So she got married to a Canadian, and she in Canada. I don't know if anybody's been to Canada. It's very, very multi. A lot of races, a lot of ethnicity. And her husband, her husband's mother, so her mother-in-law. They were just talking, and all her neighbors were from the Middle East, and all they're amazing, and this great food and all this stuff. And she starts telling her the same things I used to tell her in high school. And she messaged me. She's like, you were right all along. There was all these struggles. She goes, you were right, and I apologize, because she did some things to me about personally, like I was someone trying to brainwash people and things like that. And she apologized and came to the conclusion that the information I was given was true. And fast forward to now, visiting for the first time in my life. I took my mother, and it was about 2 years before she passed away. She hadn't gotten back. My father passed away in 2007. He would have passed away a long time ago. I hadn't seen something like that in today's current events. But I took my mother for the first time in like 47 years. She hasn't been back. And she remembers, so I took her to Jerusalem, and she's like, she's crying. I used to play at that tree. I used to sit over there, and all these memories came back to her of just visiting there. And I took her back to her city too, which was Ramon, and my father was from Mandalay. And we were just fine. So speaking of apartheid, and I'm there with my mother. I'm lucky enough to come through the Israeli because I have an American passport. So a lot of people that can't come through Israeli airport. They have to come through Jordan and come through the and immediately I said, wow, these are nice highways. There's barely anybody on these highways. They said, the guy that was with me was my cousin of mine. He's like, yeah, well, we have a white license plate. I said, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, it means it's an Israeli car. And you can drive in anything and anywhere. I said, all right, what's the difference? He said, well, if you're in the Palestinian territories, you only get yellow licenses, and you cannot drive on the Israeli highways that are in the West Bank. So in my land, the land I'm from, it's like there's a highway right there. And anything on the other side of the highway, which is my family has about another 1,000 acres, we can't touch, we can't farm, we can't pick the olive trees from it, can't touch anything for it or do anything to it. And we can't even drive that. If we happen to be on the highway, your phone won't work. If you have certain cellular connections within the West, you would have to have an Israeli cellular connection. You get to Jerusalem. Ask for a taxi. Taxi cab man opens the door. Are you Jewish? Are you Israeli? Or are you Palestinian? I said, I'm American. Come on, he goes. Are you Israeli or are you Palestinian? I said, my ethnicity is Palestinian. Get out of here. Drive away. Go get the Palestinian taxi. So when we're talking apartheid, there's a Palestinian bus, Israeli bus. There's a highways for there is no highway for Palestinians. There's only the highways for the Israelis and those white license plate cars. And if you have yellow, you have to go through the towns, through this, through that. And then I get to Hebron. And I mean, I've never had a real culture shock in my life. I never knew what that was, culture, like a shock. And I thought it was a ghost town. And as she was saying, one of the ladies were saying that the doors she was saying, they literally they closed the doors off. Totally. The only way they can come out are from the back doors. They're not allowed on the main street. And all I see is this little kid. I don't know where he came from. He has a tray of like sweets. And I think it's a thing that they do there. It's like, I don't know, I heard somebody say it before. But he was barefoot. And that's the first thing he was trying to do, is just feed us sweets. And they're not allowed on these streets. And then all their windows are caged. And from one end of the street, housing, it's like imagine a block. From one block end to the house to the next. And it's like it's in between the houses. It's not even, it's like it's a house. It's connected to house, totally gated off. And you have to go through it's like a checkpoint. You have to go through the gate that spins. And you have to put your passport up on the wall so the Israeli guy can see it. There's 2 Israeli men inside there. And I went through one and I kept walking. Nobody. So I went through another, keep walking until I could get to the grave burial site of Abraham that's sitting there. And this is why Hebron was so important, because Abraham's there. Now, of course, the Israelis can just drive right in. They have a gate and they just drive right to it. But us, we have to park very far and just walk to it, which was an experience, obviously. But by the time I got to the actual grave burial site, I was sobbing like a little child. I have a twin brother, I forgot to mention that, but me and him were just sobbing like little kids. I was like, I've never felt anything like this, or even experienced anything like this. But people tend to say they want to say that there's no apartheid. I mean, it's totally present when you're there. You got young kids just walking around with machine guns. And then you have those people being protected by Israeli defense forces. So it's not just one layer; it's two layers. And I've learned so much from going there. I had to prove that walking into Jerusalem to go to the mosque, Al-Aqsa, every gate is gated by the Israeli defense force. And on the inside, there's some Palestinian forces, which they're not forces really, they're just like, let's just check you out kind of thing. So I had to prove that I was Muslim to the Israeli man, which was I actually appreciated that. I have to say the fact, yeah. So I'd say the fact that because the reason they do that, this is the amazing part, the reason they do that is because on a daily, settlers try to sneak in either mischief or to steal someone's home. You get out of your house, you leave your house empty to go to get groceries or go get a snack, and they sneak into your house, you will never get your home back. And I seen them trying to look like a Muslim woman, total niqab though. They would do total niqab. And right in front of my eyes, the shopkeeper knew it wasn't a Muslim woman. I'm like, how do you know that? I thought I was about to see someone getting beaten. They pulled the hair, their hijab, down. And I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And it was a guy. The lost, trying to get in the outside. So me experiencing all this stuff, made me come back to learn more about what's happening over there. And there's no sugarcoating. I mean, like I said in the beginning, the people in America are, and it's intentional. People in America are uninformed, and if they're informed, they're misinformed. So
thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions for me or the panelists? I'd like to open it up to a Q&A. Thomas?
So, I think it was just today, you know, and talking about I think the historian was saying that, like, it's not that people deny that it happened, but they deny that it was that there was a fight.
Mm.
And does anyone fill me on that? Like, they just, it's like if we were up there.
It's very strategic.
Yeah, so it's just is it just a way to play down? Like,
yeah.
Oh, well, it wasn't planned, so it's not like we controlled it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times they like to say that there wasn't even a Palestine there first.
Right.
And this is what I was trying to say about the Sykes-Picot, because the British didn't give them, they faked that they were going to give them a country. Because prior to that, it was known as the Ottoman Empire. Now the Ottomans themselves would call this area as Qudus or Palestine, right? And once the Ottoman Empire fell, right, it was still known as Palestine. Prior to Ottoman and after Ottoman, but they never recognized. Okay, and I guess since the British never recognized something, because it doesn't exist.
Right.
So
They didn't get to draw little lines around it and say, this is what that is.
So when they say, well, what was the first president? I'm like, we've never had the chance to control our own country as a nation. But we knew we were an ethnic group of the area. So it's yeah. I mean, I respect your question, but I just think sometimes some people are just not informed enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to add to that point in Elan Pape's The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, chapter 5, goes into length about the blueprint for ethnic cleansing, Plan Delet. And I just want to read just a sentence here. So in Ben Gurion's diaries, this was before the establishment of Israel. Ben Gurion was the first president of Israel. He doesn't talk much about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. However, to his inner circles, he spoke a very different language. To members of his party, early in April, he proudly listed the names of the Arab villages Jewish troops had recently occupied. On another occasion, on 6th of April, we find him rebuking socialist learning members of the Histadrut's executive who questioned the wisdom of attacking peasants instead of controlling their landlords. So in chapter 5, you can read all about the Plan Delet and how it was executed. So that's a good book to refer to.
Prior to that Plan Delet, there was very wealthy Zionists that were coming in and just innocently buying buildings. And as they continued to do that, the Palestinians realized that they were sniffing something wrong was going on. It was when they started buying so many next to each other, and people would start moving in. This is prior.
The Ashkenazi.
Yes, the Ashkenazi. Mainly Rothschild himself was Rothschild. Evelyn Rothschild himself was buying products, and the Plan Dalet was actually organized underground. They specifically would buy like a wheat factory or a milk factory, and a lot of their plans and everything were on tunnels underground. Isn't that interesting? Or under the factory so that they wouldn't be seen and be caught. But and many Israelis themselves, even Pape would say that the world of terrorism was started there with this, and Menachem Begin actually takes credit for that. He was proud of it. Which, that's all. I mean, what else do you have to say?
Right.
Yeah.
Every accusation.
Is a confession. Christine.
I was wondering, I don't mention this at the beginning that, a lot of people think that it's a religious war when it's not. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you see in Ireland or Rwanda where they sort of constructed things that colonizers constructed this sort of animosity between people and between whether it started that way or not. And I think it's kind of happening now in the States where everything is turning into anti-Semitism or whatever. It's not what's actually what people are saying. So I'm just wondering to what extent it has kind of become that, if at all, where there is then people think that
I mean, I look at it as this: Zionists, the way they move, the way they've handled this. I believe partially it is a religious thing, but all the Jews don't agree to that same religious act. And it's not just one facet. It's land, it's religious, and they want wealth from it. And everyone's finding out what happened just recently. What they just found out is offshore. So it's never one facet, so you can pinpoint one thing. It's many things. That's true. And as far as the animosity between the two, a lot of people don't, and I don't understand why this hasn't been spoken about more. The Palestinians themselves were Semites. We are in the 100% of the definition of Semites, and Semite actually comes back from Noah, his children. One of his children was named Shem. Shem occupied these areas that the language of Shem continued, and those people were known as the Shemites. So and from North Africa to the Arabian to the whole area, Sham. That's what used to be called in Arabic, Sham. These areas prior to the nationalization of these lands and the slicing up of everything. Everybody was known as Sham or the Levant in those areas. But they do, I mean, it's a colonizer's same scheme, it's not new, it's divide and conquer. They've been doing it. The West Bank, look at it, it's thousands of pockets. So it is just pockets everywhere. And that's on a small scale. On the large scale, you have West Bank, and you got totally opposite ends. That was purposely done when they went in with the planned ballot to make sure they separated the two factions so that we can pick one or we can pin one onto the other. And that was the main focus of Netanyahu supporting Hamas in 2019. He had to support them because he didn't want Fatah to take over Gaza as well. Then he one unifying factor, and you can't attack all that at once. So when you have two factions, we can pinpoint one extreme terrorist and we can attack it.
Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but as we clean up, you can come talk to the panelists. And please, DC, the 18th, York on the 19th, see us about carpooling. We are gonna carpool to DC, so please let us know. Grab some business cards, get in touch with us, be on our mailing list. We send out weekly emails of all of our public initiatives. If you want to get more involved and you want to be in the organizing spaces and do some of the the back scenes work in the education committee or the healthcare committee, divestments, government, please see us as well. And we can certainly onboard you as a member of HPC. Thank you everyone for coming. And please try some cookies, Leila and Kathleen.
Feel free to take